Hello and welcome back to the Data Privacy Lawyer. It's Funmi Owolabi, Principal Attorney at the firm. So today we're going to be looking at Xiaomi's cookie notice. So I want to take a look at different cookie notices for multinational organizations and see what their privacy posture is or what we can deduce based on their public-facing documents. So let's take a look at this policy by Xiaomi. Okay, so they have a policy. They've also listed essential cookies and they've listed duration. We're going to talk about this today, duration. Also, there's an opportunity to manage the cookies. I'm scrolling to the bottom because I wanted to get a sense of geography. This influences obligations under data protection laws. Now, the first thing I'm going to mention here is that Xiaomi actually has users in the European Economic Area. The obligations for users in the European Economic Area is different to those for users in China. And one of the first questions that most privacy counsel are going to ask is, in which geography does an organization provide its goods and services? If you're providing your goods and services in a particular country, more likely than not, you are processing personal data in those geographies. And that will influence the type of guidance that a lawyer is going to give you as an organization on how you can comply with the data protection laws. So the first thing I want to make mention is Xiaomi actually provides user services in the European Economic Area. Now, the reason this is interesting is because firstly, we weren't presented with any type of cookie banner, and a cookie banner basically just gives us notice that, hey, cookies are being utilized by our site. The second thing is I just had a quick peek at how I can manage my cookies. And the assistance that Xiaomi has provided are related to looking at the cookie policies of all of these browsers, which I think is interesting. Let's actually take a look at this before we go back to the top. You have full control over the cookies when using our website. However, please note that if you reject the use of these essential cookies, some of the functions on our website may be affected and may not work correctly. So we have indication that essential cookies are definitely being used. And it's interesting because it looks like Xiaomi actually allows users to reject the use of their essential cookies, whereas generally on most sites, you cannot reject these cookies because they allow the site to function. Now, a question I would probably have is, what do they consider to be essential cookies? It might be above. The reason we're spending a couple minutes looking at managing the cookies is because it doesn't seem very easy to manage the cookies directly from the Xiaomi site. The option that's been presented here is either go onto your device and browser to provide a way to set your cookie preferences, or go to the cookie policies of the following browsers. Now, this is interesting because they do obtain the personal data of users in the European Economic Area. Generally, we should be able to manage our preferences directly on the site to opt out of certain cookies. Now, they've mentioned essential cookies, but we have no date to identify whether or not it is solely essential cookies that is being used by Xiaomi in 2025. So that's also really important. So let's go to the top. Xiaomi's websites and online services may use cookies and other similar tracking technologies. So I'll be looking for indication of what these other similar tracking technologies are, because when we were presented with the option to manage our cookies, the only discussion was related to essential cookies. Okay, so we're going to be looking for this as well. To render our website's functionality and improve your experiences. Now, this is interesting because below, the opportunity to manage our preferences was exclusive to essential cookies. It wasn't related to cookies that improve the experience. Now, I don't know if this is what they constitute to be essential or what they consider to be an improvement to the experience. Is that related to personalization? Is that related to analytics? This could be anything. So we'll continue to look at this cookie policy to identify what this constitutes, but it's really important for organizations to be clear on which types of cookies they use so that their preference center aligns with the cookies that they're obtaining on individuals and categorizing them appropriately so that consumers are able to understand what is actually being used from a data protection standpoint, and also making sure that their privacy practices align with the notice or policy they place on their site. Which is why it's so important for organizations to place a date for when their policies and notices have been last reviewed. We may also use them for a range of purposes when you visit our website, read, click, or download information. Other similar technologies such as a website beacon and local storage are used to store information on your device and record your actions or preferences over time. In this policy, we refer to all of these technologies as cookies. Now, this is very interesting. And what I wanted to make a note of is I don't have access to any internal documents. My review of these cookie policies is based on what us as consumers are seeing, right? I'm a consumer of Xiaomi's website, right? That's how I'm operating right now. I don't know what they consider to be these other similar tracking technologies. I am intrigued that they've decided to refer to the technologies like beacons and local storage as a cookie, because unless there's a definition of a cookie, these may not constitute that. So in the policy, referring to every single similar technology as a cookie could be a bit misleading, okay? Different cookies remain for different periods of times on your devices. We may use both session cookies and persistent. Session cookies expire when you close your browser. Persistent cookies remain after you close the browser and may be used by your browser on subsequent visits to the website or service. I just wanted to quickly do a quick control find and look at whether or not scope has been provided. They mention service. Let's look at it for service first and see if they define what a service is. Xiaomi website and online services. Okay, but what does this constitute? That would be interesting. I think consumers would benefit from knowing what constitutes an online service, because this could be many different things. And I think that this particular policy is on the main website, but what constitutes online service would be really useful for a consumer to know so they can understand what cookies relate to them as they interact with, the several different platforms that Xiaomi probably has. The policy explains how we use cookies and other tracking technologies, what they're used for, and how you can change your preferences. Now, this is intriguing because we already looked at how we can change our preferences, and it doesn't appear clear how the website facilitates that. It seems like the burden is on the consumer to go onto the cookie notices and policies for different browsers, which, based on at least the European Union data protection laws, Xiaomi has more obligations in the European Union at a minimum. Cookies can be used for a variety of purposes. On this site, we only use cookies to maintain the essential functionality of our website and to detect the website's performance that will help us work more efficiently. Now, this is very interesting. They've put this in bold, and I have no problem with that. Let me tell you where my concern or intrigue would be. They've talked about Xiaomi's websites and online services in this first provision, but later below, they talk about exclusive cookie usage on the site. Now, my question is, do these two provisions align? Because this is just talking about the site. They talk about the essential cookies for the site. But above, they've inferred that this cookie policy addresses the websites and other online services. Do you see that? On this site, we only use cookies to maintain the essential functionality of our website and to detect the website's performance that will help us work more efficiently. What about the cookies related to online services? Where is the representation about what those cookies are and whether or not there are those that are outside the essential functionality of the website? Let's keep on reading and see if we can identify that. These cookies are essential to the user's movement around the website. Okay, what about the online services? For example, they can be used to detect risks and prevent CSRF attacks. Now, this is interesting. I think if you're going to place a acronym on the site, you should define it at the first instance so consumers know what a CSRF attack actually is. Essential cookies are necessary for the website functionality and cannot be switched off by users. Now, this again is a very interesting sentence because essential cookies are necessary for the website's functionality and cannot be switched off by users. But it says here, you have full control over the cookies when using our website. But there's only one cookie that you use for the website and it's essential. You've said it can't be turned off. But then below you say, however, please note that if you reject the use of our essential cookie, some of the functions on our website may be affected and may not work correctly. So there seems to be some conflicting information here. I want to go back to the top because I am still very intrigued about the fact that the representation on the cookie policy only addresses website cookie usage, but there's reference to online services that haven't been addressed. So there's one of two things. Either we don't have any insight into cookies related to the online services, or there are no online services and there's only a website. There needs to be clarity and transparency when companies create a cookie policy or notice for their consumers, which is why dates are so important. So I think this was a very good review for one, business owners to understand what their obligations are, and two, what types of insights they need to provide their consumers when they draft these notices and policies that they place on their site. So I hope you enjoyed this review and I'll see you in another one.